What's up, Grassroots World? I'm Chris Logan.
I'm Ernie Barber.
And we are the Flagrant 2 podcast. Coach, what's going on, man?
Man, exciting. It's kind of after all the state games this last weekend, it's just like coming down. It's like, I don't know, coming down from a high. It's over with. So now gearing up for AAU season and what goes on. We got practice tomorrow. So lots going on and a lot to talk about in this. Certainly was exciting. I mean, the state tournament was just fire this year. It was amazing. Some really cool games to watch. A lot we'll talk about on here. A lot of players to talk about. Just amazing basketball. And there's not much not to like. I mean, if you didn't win, it is what it is. Certainly understand that. But the teams that won, wow, just amazing. So
no, I 100% agree. I think in my 20 years or so of living here and watching Oklahoma basketball, and obviously I've been scouting for a long time, but now into the media sector for the last 2-3 years with Okie Ball. That state tournament, if we're doing a ranking of a state tournament, it's got to be near the top. I mean,
it was amazing.
It was special. The championship games were special. Some of the games prior to that, quarterfinals, semifinals, were some of the best games I've seen. A lot of overtime games.
The big time players all played big, not just
Huge.
one. They all played big in moments, and it was exciting. I mean, I sit here, I got goosebumps kind of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Just being in that moment and performing, and it was what you paid for. And of course, everybody knows you paid because you went from one to the other, like I did.
Yeah.
I was traveling back and forth on I-35 like you were. So
it
was crazy.
It was quite the journey, and I know someone, I think Dondo put like I should have had a camera crew. You would have had
and a plane or a helicopter.
You would have had quite the show if you did. If you watched how I moved from venue to venue, I called it the Okie Ball Gauntlet. I set out to hit every single tournament championship game, and I did it.
The Okie Ball shuffle. That's what it was. You were shuffling as soon as one was over. You were shuffling.
I had some guys try to hang with me. My guy Jay Wiggins, a photographer, great photographer out there. He stuck with me for the first 3 legs of the gauntlet, but he didn't make it the last 2. I didn't have very many people with me at the end of the night, but shout out to all those guys, every one of them that even work for the competitor companies. I see your grind and I respect it for sure.
And it's about the kids, so we're promoting the kids and giving marketing the teams and the coaches and the ability of the players. So absolutely shout out to
Oklahoma in its small town nature and feel. It tends to people be competitive towards each other, but at the end of the day, the coverage of the kids and everybody trying to get around to watch as many games as possible was what this is what we're doing here. It's what I do with Okie Ball. It's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So my hat's off and respect to all those guys that were putting that grind in, because grind is definitely what it was over the last, since Tuesday when it started with the 3A on. It was just, balls to the wall, and it was just going and trying to get as many games as possible.
And you even had tire issues in the whole 9, so man, you had a bunch of drama going on.
I needed that helicopter that they talked about. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year we
could put a GoFundMe together and give me that copter so I can.
Flagrant 2 GoFundMe. I
got locked out of the Lloyd Noble Center at one point. They had to rehook up the security stuff, the metal detectors. It was quite the spectacle. It needed a camera crew. It would have been some great footage for sure.
Put a helicopter pad on both of those tops of those facilities just for you flying in and out, right?
And no, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you this: the 4A game, Weatherford Douglas rematch. And we'll go into the game in a minute, but the environment.
Oh my gosh.
I've been to a lot of state fair games.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of 6A, 5A championships before they were ever at, Lloyd Noble and they were in Tulsa. I've been to – I don't remember – that may be the number one environment I've ever been in. And Douglas Weatherford was special last year.
Yeah.
But this one, there was not a seat or they're not even a seat. There wasn't even a place to stand in there.
No, it was amazing. It was a packed house.
Yeah.
The line went – it's snaked around from both sides just to get in.
Yeah, they had people. I guess they had people that were waiting that couldn't get in.
Correct.
Similar. I said I want to rank my top 3 games of the year. That is probably one, but
Yeah.
Millwood Douglas, Douglas was involved with two of these. Millwood Douglas at Douglas was special.
Yeah.
It was obviously not as big of a crowd because
Yep.
it couldn't, but the environment was top notch. But that championship game, you had to be there.
Yeah.
First of all, if
you
you
like
weren't
basketball in
there,
high school, yeah.
if you weren't there, it's almost even hard to grasp. And I have the 360 video I have on my Instagram of it if anybody wants to see what it was like in there. But it's not even, you can't even express it. You had to be there.
Yeah.
And for me, doing what I do and getting to be right there courtside, it was special. Like some of those things, like sign me up. That's all I really want to do anyways. Like for a basketball junkie like I am, obviously scouting is my number one thing. That's what evaluator scouting is what I love to do. But being a part of the game and you know, if I'm not going to be coaching, then doing this and getting to be on the floor, feel the energy.
Yeah.
When the kids are celebrating and you see that joy in them, and sometimes the opposite on the losing team.
Yeah.
But to feel that when you're down there,
The emotions are pretty
it's
amazing.
special.
Yeah.
It really is a special thing to be that close. And you know, shout out to everybody that made it a big spectacle, because it truly lived up to the hype that we thought it was. Maybe even exceeded it.
Yeah, I would say exceeded it. It was more than what I expected, and I had high expectations for that and a number of other games, and it definitely exceeded it. Let's kick off, talk about 6A to begin with, because obviously we know how that ended, but walk through that a little bit. Give me your thoughts. I will say this: we got acknowledged as experts on social media over the weekend.
Oh,
so I was
really?
very flattered by that. I was. It's nice of people to say that. Hey.
Some might call us that. Some might call us something not quite as friendly. But hey, it is what it is. You know. Hey, at the end of the day,
I will say this too: is that when those of you that are fortunate enough to get to the state tournament, whether we pick you or we do not, for whatever reason, you're there. And if we don't pick you, it's not personal. Right? This is the media, and you as coaches have to understand that we're going to pick – some people are going to pick you and some people are not. So take it for what it's worth. It's not a dig at you personally. It's just saying, hey, look, this is what we think.
It's kind of like when the Thunder came to Oklahoma City, we wanted to call ourselves a big league city. Well, this is part of becoming a big league high school city.
Correct.
Or state, let's say.
Correct.
Because – that's with me. I don't care about the division, and I've talked to this with a few people. I don't care about the 918-405 division.
No.
That means nothing to me personally.
Me
I look at it as Oklahoma is way too small to be dividing us like that. We need everybody hands on deck. We got to support all these kids, whether they're born in Tulsa or born in Oklahoma. It doesn't really, or Lawton or anywhere for that matter. It doesn't really matter to me. If you've earned it, you've earned your flowers. You have the right to be talked about, regardless of where you reside at. And that's a big part of this all to me. Is that we stop the divisiveness between one city or other, because I've seen it, and you can see it in the hate of specific kids and where they come from and those things. It's really sad that it's turned to that. But back to what you're talking about, and some of my guys that I mess with, they got onto me about my picks, and hey, it is what it is. You're still my guy, and the way I look at it is, it's motivation.
Yeah, use it as motivation.
You use it as motivation. It ain't hate. It is what it is. Someone's got to pick somebody.
Correct.
I mean, you got to pick a team. That's what we wanted to do with this, and that's what the people really enjoy.
Yep.
They love that we're making our picks. It's the first show that ever did anything like that as far as breakdowns of game by game of making picks. People love that. It's kind of like what's become – everybody wants to hear who me and you are picking.
Yep.
And it's no slight to anybody, because we're wrong. We're not always right.
Correct.
We did well. I mean, I think I only missed one game in every single bracket. So it's like hard to do because you never know how the game is going to go, and that's the beauty of basketball. It's like whenever the ball bounces that given night, it goes in. But overall, the love and the amount of people that showed
way overshadows the haters.
Oh God, yeah. It was excellent. I had so many good people that we
Yep.
met.
Me too.
Longtime fans that have never gotten to meeting us in person, and they were like, "Hey, we looked for this time to finally get to know where you were going to be and get to meet you." And it just so much good stuff comes out of it.
Yep.
It's that positive stuff like that we got to keep pushing along in this state, because that's what's going to make us a big league state and cities
Correct.
to compete with these others. We don't have as many people, but we can still sure give them coverage like they have everywhere else.
Absolutely. I just think that, I just wanted to throw that out there because,
it's true.
Again, next year, there's going to be teams next year play for state, and some we think will get there and some we don't think will get there, may get there. It's
Well, and that's not even bringing up the mid-season transfer portal now, because when picks are made preseason,
Correct.
you do not know what's
Correct.
going to happen.
And
That changes
and those
everything.
transfers, and I'll say this because I'll speak to this because on social media, the transfers, obviously Douglas got a big transfer later in the season, midway through the season, whatever it was, somewhere in there. Certainly was a pretty dynamic transfer, let's just put it that way,
Yeah.
and certainly weighted that game the way that it ended
Yeah.
up going.
Yeah.
Obviously, it went into overtime.
Yeah.
So even with that transfer, you go into overtime, and it was a nail biter. So
Yeah.
So without that transfer, who knows? They were a fantastic team before that transfer.
Yeah.
No doubt about
no
it.
doubt it.
Dynamic guard play, good bench deep,
Yeah.
the whole thing. Well coached, good coaching staff. But would they have won that game without that transfer? And we didn't pick them to win it initially.
No, those are the two teams we picked preseason to play for it.
And I still, with what was going, what the lineups were at that time, I still say that I would stick with my original.
Yeah.
But obviously, when that happened, I think
when we
things.
picked in October or whenever it was.
Yeah.
Early November, we were basing it off of the loss of Terry McMorris, who outside of Brandon Garrison, he was probably the player of the year. They could have been co-player of the year.
Yep.
Terry McMorris really could have won Gatorade Player of the Year last year, as well as he played for Douglas and how well he said. And shout out to Terry. I saw him the other night at the championship game. And I'm glad he just picked up a D1 from South Carolina State too. Big up to Terry. Great kid.
Terry's a great kid. I mean, he
no
traveled
doubt.
with us a couple times over the years, playing some tournaments. Terry's a great kid, great family, the whole nine.
Yeah. So the loss of him, you're going to say, well, Weatherford's bringing back their entire team. Of course, I'm going to probably favor them.
Yeah.
Although, like I said, hindsight is 20/20. If we knew what we knew now, we obviously changed our pick pretty much as soon as we saw what it was, how good that team, really gelled together quickly and how dynamic they were. But, they were great prior to that. And a matter of fact, I want to say May of 2022, this was the freshman year for Landry Ballard and James Green Howard. They had a monster season. I put on Twitter that Douglas was going to, take Kingfisher out and going forward. And I got a lot of flack for that. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I see that. And this is before they have Devon Scott Jones and before they had Terry McMorris and Jaden Nickens. It's like, I'm not new to this. Like, there's a reason why I'm Okie Ball and I do what I do and how much studying I do. And I really study these games. I saw what they were going to be 2 years ago. That's almost 2 years ago now, here in a month or so.
Yep.
So it's like following the patterns, I saw what they were going to be. But obviously adding a top 3, 4, 5 kid in the entire state,
it changes.
It changes everything. And it was,
it was an amazing game. The kids that were in that game, the coaches that were part of that game, the people that were in the stands are going to remember that game for a long time.
Oh, I'm going to remember that game forever. I watch, as you know, and so do you, I watch hundreds and hundreds of games, and that's just live, let alone stream on TV, whatever. I watch so many games. It's like basketball is what I do. It's why I have such a great relationship with college coaches all over the country, whether it's the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the Big East, Big 12, you name it, SEC, is because to be good at something, you have to really pour your heart into it and really I watch so many games, and I watch these kids. I don't watch a kid 2-3 times. I watch them 20, 30 times. You start getting into AAU, it even gets up to higher. So I really try to do my homework. And yes, do you miss out on? Yes, it's human nature. You miss out on kids. It's part of the game. It is what it is. But in the end, you try to identify as many as you can and help them. That's the difference. This isn't just entertainment. This isn't just talking about guys. This is legitimately trying to get them to the next level and dealing with real evaluation. So I really enjoy doing that, and that's my bread and butter. And then this is just the icing on top of the cake, and I think that this has pushed it over the edge
it was
for
amazing.
our audience. And so let's go. We'll hit that 4A game, but let's go through 6A right quick. Let's just go back down through it. Edmond North Westmore was the first game that I watched. Early
game, I'll say this. My feedback on this. Early game, a lot of turnovers in that game.
Yeah.
Shout out, I will say this, and obviously because I know the program pretty well, shout out to Coach Milwee for making state. I think that's quite an accomplishment. Yeah. And I also want to shout out a particular player that's graduating this year. Zane Zelny on that team has been a role player for 4 years.
And that's the big dude, the big guy.
Yes.
Big guy. Yep.
He's been a role player on that team. He's going to play football at UCO next year. He's going to be a tight end. Mm-hmm. He's a really good football player. But he embraced his role for 4 years. My son played on that. He played with my son. He was, he'd do anything to help the team win. Obviously loves basketball, but but he did everything that he could. And what I really appreciated about him is that when he fouled out during the game, and went over and shook Coach North's hand, on his way out. I thought that was special. But shout out to him, because a lot of role players out there don't get a shout out, and because I happen to know this kid and his family specifically or personally, I just wanted to say that because
and I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people had Westmore getting blown out in that game, and they really brought their A game. I mean, they hit some huge shots. They were playing with house money, and they really I just got to say that I thought Garrett Loper hit a bunch of big shots in that game towards the end. He had a massive 4-point play that kind of swung some momentum. It almost looked like an upset special right off the bat, and Westmore gave it their all. And speaking of, since we're talking about 6A, shout out to a Westmore legend that I got to talk to for a brief second down there. The one and only Evan Barber was down there courtside for the championship game.
He was down there with his girlfriend sitting there watching games. He said, "Dad, I'm going to go watch 6A. I'm not going to watch any of the others. I'm going to just check out 6A." So he missed out on the 4A, but
No, I saw him at the championship game and got to talk to him for a brief second or two. So it's always good following these guys that have moved on to the next level and kind of seeing what they're doing and seeing their love for the game. They come back and I talked to a number of kids that'll be graduating. Dayton Forsyth said the same thing. I'll be here next year when Dale hopefully is back in the same spot, and I'll be rooting them on in that crowd just like every other person from Dale was. So those are special moments to watch those guys come back to their alma maters and do some things like that. So that was a cool moment. I thought that, we took North. North hung out. They hung on and won that game. They moved on. We predicted Edlam, and it was. Deer Creek Edmond Memorial. You got anything on that? I just thought I thought Memorial, a lot of sophomores were shouted out this week. And I think Hudson Franz flew under a lot of people's radars. I really, and I've been on him, and everybody knows that. I've liked him. I started watching him a lot in the summer with Team Trey Young. Last year, he'll be rolling with, I believe he's playing with AAO Flight this year.
Is he?
Yep. So, but I really liked him, and I thought he really elevated his game to the next level. I thought he did some special stuff. Obviously, Kieran Padula, Dre Lanero, those guys all bring it. They advanced on, so Memorial got out of that game. The Norman Owasso, the game that I thought was going to be must-see TV, and was looking for possibly one of the best matchups of the entire tournament with Treshawn Combs-Pierce and
early on,
and Jalen Montnati. Unfortunately, Treshawn Combs-Pierce got injured on the first play of the game, offensive play of the game, and and he was in a lot of pain. So, prayers up to Trey, and I know he'll be all right. I know he's hurting right now. Hell of a career. I talked to his family, and then they know how much that I respect that kid, and he's a warrior for going out there and continuing to play. But that matchup wasn't quite what it was going to be without him.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that. I thought, just in terms of style of play and the coaching on both ends and the players. I mean, that would have been. I was excited about that game.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where it was a free throw. It was a lot of free throws in that game, and it kind of, one of the ones where it was hard to watch, but Owasso grinded it out. Jax Kerr was spectacular in that game. Jalen Montanati had a double-double. Owasso moved on and obviously and did their thing. The next one, BA Union, not what anybody probably thought, but
the biggest surprise of all, and I was just talking to coaches and different people about this game afterwards. Broken Arrow put on a clinic in that game. Shot the basketball well.
Offensively, they were
patient, moving the basketball.
Yeah,
it was a chess. They were playing chess. Union didn't shoot the ball well at all.
No,
and to me, I thought it is style of play and matchups. Broken Arrow knew what they were doing coming into that game, and they executed the game plan to a T.
And I thought no one on Union really could get into any kind of rhythm. It was a weird game for them because of how well they played all season. They had high expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Some people picked them to be the champion.
Yes.
Like they thought that they were the matchup for Edmond North, not Owasso. But that.
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, Broken Arrow. After watching the game, I see exactly how they won the basketball game, and kudos to the coaching staff and the players for executing the game plan.
Yeah.
They had the right game plan for Union, so kudos to them. But I was just thinking that Union would knock down more shots in that game and at least have some perimeter offense, and they just didn't.
No, and Diego Ochoa was on fire,
yes,
too.
He was.
I mean, he hit some massive shots in that game.
And he's been doing that all year. So
he's done that for
him.
a big part of his career, to be honest. He's always hit some big shots. And David Howell, DJ Howell was very good into me in those two games. He showed a lot of why some people think he's a, possible high major Division I point guard. Mm-hmm. Definitely a mid-major plus type guy just off the sheer body.
Yep.
When you're a 6'5", 205, 210 point guard with good passing and great defense, you got a chance to play at that level.
So I want to give credit to Broken Arrow, obviously playing defense. I mean, when you hold somebody like Union to 38 points, you're executing the game plan and you're playing solid defense.
Yeah.
So
no, and I want to give shout like I always like to do. I thought Ace Clemens, the 2024 senior for Broken Arrow, the big man, about 6'7", I thought he played unbelievable.
Yes, he did.
He ran that court as hard as he could. And he was rewarded for a lot of buckets down low, had some monster alley-oops, did some great things rebounding-wise, played a really big part for them. And, like I said in the preview of State, and even at the beginning of the season, you don't ever count out Broken Arrow. They always got guys. Coach Wallace does a great job. They always got dudes lined up. They'll probably get a bunch of move-ins next year and be great.
They know each
again.
other well too. So I think Broken Arrow was, and I know from what I heard, Broken Arrow was really looking forward to getting past Union and getting to Owasso for the next round. So we can talk a little bit about that.
And I know Owasso wanted Union because I interviewed a bunch of those kids afterwards, and they had Union circled. They wanted them, but hey, it worked out we'll just say it worked out in Owasso's favor in the end anyway. So we'll just pump to the next round. North Memorial, I thought it went
just too much firepower for North.
Yeah, it went like the games during the regular season did when they matched up. North that was never a good matchup for Memorial in any way. When I knew that they were going to be the Edlem game, you just knew that they were going to bring it. I thought Warlick, Tramble, Potts, the guys were all they was just too much for them. They ended up, but at the same time, I thought Memorial, Elijah Brown, and even Brady Handcuff, their defense, and they're coming back. So defensively, they're going to be really good.
Yep.
And I think Hudson Franz will obviously be their go-to guy next year. But I'm expecting some of the young guys, DJ Padula, the youngest
Stepping
Padula
up.
will step up.
Another Padula.
Jack Sheriff. They've got a couple 2026 guys that are really, really good. Edmond Memorial will probably be back in state next year. I'll just say that
I would say
now.
that's probably
won't give you too much about next year because we'll do that. But I definitely probably say
I would say so too. My thing has always been, and we've talked about it on this podcast, is that Memorial, if they struggle, is to score points, and they become very rigid offensively, and so sometimes. I think obviously they held with North early on.
Yeah.
Defensively, they were getting stops on North early on and hanging in that game, and then the wheels kind of fell off there, and hence we have a 22-point win for Edmond North.
Absolutely. So then we move on to Owasso Broken Arrow. That was to me Jax Kerr's statement game.
Yes.
What did he had 20 and 10
Yeah,
early in the third quarter.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was impressive. Been saying it all year. Jax is in terms of
he changed their team.
Yes.
I mean, he did. He changed their team dynamics when he came over there.
Yep. And here's the other thing that and I don't know people that watch or people that know. Jax Kerr is a fantastic shooter from the perimeter.
Yeah, knocked down a couple threes in a row in that game.
But a lot of people may not know that about him. The kid can play on the perimeter.
Yeah.
And now he's got a game. Coach Montnati has worked with him in the block and rounding out his game. I mean, this kid's got a bright future.
Well, and that's one thing I got to say about Coach Montnati is he laid the blueprint out to me early on what this kid's going to do, what that kid's going to do, and it literally went like a script. I mean, I got to give him credit. I don't know what's in that water up in Owasso, but I want to drink some of that.
Let's put it this way, and guys, this is where I think a lot of people, in terms of coaching and people wanting to know people's backgrounds. Brian obviously played basketball at a high level. Mm-hmm. Now he's coaching. He can evaluate players. He knows a team environment to be successful. When you play at a certain level, you understand the roles that are required to be successful. And so, he's just doing what he's always done, right?
Yeah.
Putting guys in the right places, getting the right pieces. Yeah. He's putting a puzzle together, and Owasso, had all the pieces.
And I mean, that's, Bowden Williams, Cody Lecklider, guys.
Their defense to me, when you look at the points scored against them.
Yeah.
I mean, here it is. Norman scored 48. Okay, and then Broken Arrow scores 43, and then Edmond North scores 53. I mean, guys, that's
and that one went into overtime.
Yes,
otherwise
that went into overtime.
That.
So you're talking in regulation, they're holding teams to under 50 points a game.
Well, I mean,
in the state tournament,
you're looking at a lineup of 6'2", 6'3", 6'7", and then they're telling me that Jack's measured in at 6'11" barefoot.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all. 6'11"
and can play.
6'11" can play and shoot. What else does a coach need to see?
Exactly.
Every single mid-major school should be in on Jax Kerr. I mean, immediately. I know they're going to wait till the summertime and see how does he do against other 6'10" bigs, but those translatable skills that he have translate to the next level. I don't care what anybody says. I've been doing this a long time.
His body's just now starting to come along. I mean, he's going to get stronger. He's going to add muscle to that frame. I mean,
Jax Kerr has a potential to be one of the top prospects in this entire state.
Correct.
His teammate is he is the number one prospect in this state. But Jax Kerr
might be right behind him.
Could end up being number two. At 6'11", can shoot. Just think about the development over the next 2 years.
We could be seeing him on in the NBA someday. You just never know. If he keeps working hard and developing.
That's
sky's the limit for him.
Size and shooting ability, it's crazy. So he had a great game in that one, and that's the brilliance and the beauty of that Owasso Rams team is Jalen didn't have to score a lot, and they still won. And then you get into the next game we're about to talk about, which is the championship game, which was North Owasso, which, by the way,
that was amazing.
That fourth quarter overtime was one of the best 6A games I've ever seen.
I'll give a shout out to Keontae. Keontae was running screens and guarding Jalen on defense, and then trying to keep things rolling after Dylan fouled out. and then Keontae's, still doubling down and trying to keep them in the game. I
don't know how we can how anybody can talk about that game and not talk about Keontae Tramble in that game.
It was amazing.
Special.
Yes, special. I'll just say this:
Division I special
for not winning a state championship. I couldn't have asked if that were my son. I couldn't have asked for a more pure performance of a kid that's put his life out there and played basketball.
Dude laid it on the line.
He laid it all out there.
And I'll just tell you this: being on the floor like I was, the what you could feel between him and Jalen going back and forth was real.
Yep.
The mutual respect of those two, like those were two gladiators going at it blow by blow. You could see it, you could feel it when Tramble hit that three to go into overtime, and then Jalen hit about 2 or 3 shots like that in overtime where people down there had me. I was telling him what he's going to do. I'm like, spin baseline, fade away. Like, I watched him so much, and I mean, it was. You could know he was doing it, but you can't stop it.
Individual performances, and I know the atmosphere at the 4A game was, out of this world, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But to me, watching the down the stretch of this game, it was probably. I don't know. It wasn't better than the 4A game, but to me, it didn't have the crowd feel.
And that's venue.
Yeah,
that's venue. If we would have moved that to the other venue, it would have been like that.
It would. I mean, I put the game itself on the same plane as the other. I mean, it was amazing.
The only thing that took away from that game was the fact that Warlick had those 4 fouls, and he was basically neutralized because Dylan Warlick would have had a monster game if he was able to play in that game. Would the outcome have been different? We'll never know.
We'll never know.
But we know what Dylan Warlick is and how consistent he is. And speaking of gladiators, he's a gladiator of all. He's right up there at the top. So I think Tramble finished with 27 or 29 points. Yeah. Jalen with 34 and 5 as a sophomore. Yeah. And that leads me into what I was going to talk about was. No one has ever won 6A 3 times in a row.
That's hard, man.
Well, that streak is alive, but not for very long, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because that Owasso Rams team won earlier than people thought, including myself, who has been the biggest Jalen Montanati guy as far as telling you how good he is 2 years ago and at what level and how special he is, and that's the evaluation I saw.
No doubt.
But even I didn't think that they could get past Edmond North this year.
Yep.
But we did caveat that by saying, unless Jalen has a Jalen game, and anything is possible. Yeah. And that's exactly what Jalen Montanati did.
Yep.
What I was thinking was funny.
Special.
After I gave Okie Ball Player of the Game to each player, I realized for like the first time in a while, like sometimes when I pick these, it's not always the best kid. It's like sometimes it's a role player that stepped up. But and I think you said it earlier on in this podcast, like the stars came to play and every one of them performed.
Yes.
Especially in the championship games. When I looked at the end of the thing, I looked at who I gave it to. I'm like, that's basically your first team, minus Warlick because he was on foul trouble. Those are pretty much the guys,
Yep.
So it was cool to see that those guys stepped up in that moment. Owasso makes history. That's the first championship that they've ever won.
Yep.
And they've had guys like Shake Milton who plays in the NBA right now. And so think about that. If you want to think about how special Jalen is, and it's not just Jalen, because we talked about Jax. Bowden Williams was like 9, 6, and 6 in that game.
Think about some of the greatest players that ever come out of this state. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. Like Trae Young never won a state title.
No.
And I mean, it's Trae Young.
It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And that's the point, is that to be able to win one as a sophomore and with that team's very talented, no doubt. It's not Jalen. It's the Owasso Rams.
And Edmond North will be good again. I'm sure they'll bring people in. But the problem is Owasso might bring people in.
Yeah. No, the bottom line is, and I think you're right. I mean, Owasso is probably if I were to give a favorite for next year based on how they performed this year, I would certainly give them that. But I think
I might give them the favorite for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see.
Correct.
I mean, we can't foresee what's going to happen when we just talked about Nickens.
Yes.
Anything can happen.
Correct.
Somebody could put a super
because
team
now
together.
that the OSAA rules
Yes.
and them letting it kind of
Yeah.
open up the transfer process, it's going to change. Next year is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So you can't really say, but I would just say this: I'll go out on a limb and say Edmond North will likely make it to state next year, and so will Owasso.
Yeah, I would almost bet anything on those two things.
So what do you think in 5A? Moving on.
Yes, and definitely there was some excellent matchups in that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the championship
we'll
game
go
there
through the
was
first round
fantastic.
quickly for time purposes. We won't be able to spend as much time as we want to. But Midwest City, Collinsville, Zach Brown, who's going to Missouri S&T, the big man, was a load and a half. He was special. Midwest City is crazy because Carl Sean has to guard. He has to play center on defense. He basically has to play the big man position for them. And so he's taken on a kid that's as big as Zach Brown and still has to do what he does on offense. It's quite something special to watch.
Midwest City won by a total of 6 points for the entire tournament.
Yeah. And,
That's crazy.
And
could have went so many different ways.
Had some special performances from DJ Denson and Roy Henderson, and we'll get into as
Holland
we get
Hall,
further.
Carl Albert.
Holland Hall, Carl Albert was what I talked about on our last show.
Knew it was going to be good.
We knew Julius Wilson versus Jaden Hopkins was going to be special, and it lived up to all the hype. And let's not forget about Carter Benton.
Yeah.
Excellent career.
Yes.
A great kid. A kid that every single 4-year, D2 school in the state should be all over him. If they're not already, they should definitely be. Sniper, shooter, lived up to the hype. Julius Wilson, the 6'4" wing, can play some PG, was great. To me, that was the Jaden Hopkins that I raved about to every D1 coach this last summer when I saw him.
Yep.
That's what I saw, and him and his AAU coaches and his parent, they know what it is with him. He's going to have a ton of interest, and he will pick up some D1 offers this summer, I believe, running with Southern Ties.
5A was probably, in terms of contesting, I mean, every game was a nail-biter.
Yes.
Every game was a nail-biter.
Yeah, 5A was excellent. Booker T, Edison, Booker T, B.J. Harris was exceptional. Isaac Sanders. These guys have all been talked about on this show. Mason Matulis. Mason Matulis isn't new to us. I've been on him since the East-West Showdown.
The East-West Showdown, and then I remember during that's when we watched him.
That's where we saw like this kid's gonna have a chance.
And think about this: the Booker T Edison game was the largest margin of victory, 63-55 in the entire 5A tournament.
And it was closer than that for a lot of the game.
Yeah, heck yeah, it was.
And Jeremiah Johnson, and we talked about him a ton of times. He's another one, like, he had to play the post, like, on defense. They had him in the paint the entire time. He's going to be one of those kids to me when he gets to college. He's even going to look better than he did in high school.
Yeah,
he's going to get to be his natural position all the way around.
Yeah,
he's a specimen, man.
Yeah, I rave about this kid. His
body is second to none, though.
Yep.
The messages I was getting from other scouts and texting me during that game, like, this kid, the way he's built, I'm like, yep. And I'm like, that's Ernie's guy. Like, Ernie's been pushing that kid from when I remember.
And even his body is second to his instincts. I love the kid. I think
picked up an offer in the tunnel. He didn't even get out of the tunnel, and they offered him.
Good for him, because he deserves every bit of it.
Yeah,
so
great kid and great. Booker T is going to be you could pencil Booker T into something that if Midwest City keeps all their guys and Carl Sheon doesn't go prep, you could have a definite rematch and Crossings will be in that mix. Let's not forget about them. But that's the next game. Del City Crossings. Was
shout out to Coach Hatch.
We shouted him out last time. Did an excellent job this season.
Almost came away with the first round win over Crossings, 42-39. I mean, Crossings, we've been picking them all year.
Yeah.
And then obviously Midwest City, some changes, some things happened there, and then that became what we thought would end up being. And Booker T said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen.
And Michael Graham Jr. and was really good in that game. And I think every junior college should be all over Michael Graham.
Yeah.
If he's going to want to do basketball, he's a no-brainer to me. Strong, pit bull.
He is extremely athletic and quick.
Man.
Extremely. Probably one of the, I'd say, top 3, top 4 quickest guys in the entire
Well, he's one of the top
class.
athletes in Oklahoma. Dual sport kid.
Yeah.
I mean, excellent at
I
football,
watched
excellent
him
at basketball.
last summer in a Midwest showdown where they took them all out to Kansas City or wherever it was and watched him. I mean, he's just he's extremely athletic.
So,
great instincts as well. I mean, just you can tell he's a defensive back on the football field.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And I thought Cam Parker and Phoenix were both really good in that game, and I gave Cam Parker the player of the game in that because in overtime he was clutch when he hit those big buckets in that game. So I thought he did some great things for them. And guess what? They're all coming back. They are going to lose Matt Goodell and Evan Kratz. That will hurt. Braden Buckingham and guys like that will step up into a bigger role, and they'll have to fill those big shoes because Matt Goodell and Evan Kratz never got enough credit to me for that team, and they've always been glue guys who can actually flat out play. Those two kids are ballers.
I think it'll be interesting too, and this is something for you this summer, is watching how those other kids develop stepping into those roles. The guys that you see, it'll be interesting to see how they spring and summer this year, they take on bigger roles.
And I think that come June and we get into some of them team camps and stuff, we'll be able to maybe, as long as all their guys are playing, we might be able to see a little bit. That's where I like to get my view of what some of these guys are going to be in their new role. But I come out of that bottom part of this thing and go, Booker T. Washington, who? I mean, they got so many guards that are – it's like you can't even name them all. They're so good. And I mean, Isaac Sanders hit some huge shots in that game. Mason Matulis, he didn't surprise me because I think he's like that. I think that B.J. Harris was exceptional. He's such a feisty defensive guy, stocky built, athletic, another guy, that kid that plays both sports. I thought he was one of their best players all season, and I think, and also the junior Jamari Simpson was great in this tournament as well at attacking the glass and defensively. Really did some great things.
Loaded with guards, fantastic.
Matter of fact,
guards.
after that Dell City game, I told J.D. Runnels, who's Oklahoma football great, and Coach Hatchett is related to him. I told him I thought that this is, and I said it on our podcast, I got to give Coach Hatchett his flowers. I mean, he's already gotten them from me in a sense. I've talked about him. But the fact that he took that team and they almost got to the semifinals and how that thing went to overtime, you can't give enough credit to a coach like that where the guys all buy into him and his speeches that he posts on social media is second to none.
Hall of Fame coach as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely, Coach Hatchett will go down. And he has a Hall of Fame coach sitting next to him in Coach Tommy Griffin as well.
Correct.
Who one of the best coaches that's ever come, ever donned the sideline, John Marshall legend. So and OCS legend too, by the way. But his two sons helped that. Went 4 in a row. That's, it is what it is. So, anyways, we go to the next round. Midwest City, Carl Albert. A battle of, once again, electric guards on both sides of that game.
Crosstown rivals.
Crosstown rivals. Nail biter again, like you said, Midwest City's games.
Man.
Where, you want to talk about a run. Coach Torrey Noel, in his first year, brings home the gold ball is a hell of an
against
accomplishment.
That gauntlet too. When you look at everybody in that, the players in that in 5A and the teams, oh man, that's a gauntlet. Every round is a dogfight. They get out of that the Carl Albert game 56-54. When you look at Carl Albert, what they've done historically in that class, winning all the state titles, the coaches, when you get to the semifinals, heck, you get to the beginning of state, looking at all the coaches, you go down the coaches of the 5A teams, and it's just Hall of Fame. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
so the level of coaching in 5A was, and in all classes for that matter, but when I look at 5A, it's just it was a gauntlet. And so them getting that 2-point win, the fact that Midwest City was able to play to get these nail bite wins and then come back and get another one and then get another one just speaks to, I give credit to the coaches, obviously the players, but to be able to handle that and coach through that is
special.
Anybody that's ever coached. And when you get into nail-biting games, and not only you're nail-biting at the first round of state, because you're wanting like crazy for your players to the amount of stress, and then it's day after day after day. Those guys are they're probably laying on the couch right now trying to recover from it, and I give them all the take all week.
And we'll see what Carl Albert does, because as long they're bringing back Jaden Hopkins and they've got Steven Anderson and they're going to lose a couple seniors in Hutch Russell and Ryan Reynolds and Quincy Hopkins, who had excellent careers at Carl Albert.
Absolutely.
So they'll have to retool, but they're in a good place as long as Jaden Hopkins is down there and doing what he does. Midwest City advances down to the bottom. Booker T. Washington Crossings. I know Phoenix was doing his thing for Crossings, but I think the pressure of Booker T and the amount of guards, it got to them.
I said this all year that if they were matched up with Booker T, that would be the Achilles heel. That's where the opportunity for losing a game might come, and Crossings met them in the semifinals, and after beating Edison in the first round coming in, they were ready to go, and they of course won by 7 points. It was a tight game throughout, pulled it out at the end, but at that point I felt like, you know what, Booker T might win this whole thing. But yet they've got to go through Midwest City, and that's how we got to the finals. But Crossings had a fantastic year. Talked to a number of people about them throughout the year, and I think it's really they've got a huge. I mean, who's coming back? I mean, come on. Yes, they're going to be losing some seniors this year, but I see them being able to fill those roles. Hopefully, we'll see how those guys do. Come summer ball and then spring and summer and AAU circuit.
So the championship game was 2:00. Midwest City Crossings. Midwest City Booker T. Excellent game.
Yep.
I thought. And once again, this is another kid that his dad knows and he's an assistant on that staff. Deshaun Denson is he's so composed at his age. It's like nothing speeds him up. He plays at his own pace. He shoots the ball. He's one of the top shooters in the state, regardless of class. He's one of the best scorers in the state, regardless of class. I thought he was excellent. Carl Sean Young took over late in that game, like I would expect the 4-star to do.
Knocked down big free throws too. I think a lot of times people look at Carlos Sean as being an athlete and doing all these great things athletically, but he knocked down free throws. They needed free throws to win that game. He did. He knocked them down. I mean,
he did. And then of course
it's always the little things that people overlook when it comes to winning basketball games, and he did all those things.
Well, yeah, and then I'd say Jarvis Nash, who the junior who. They didn't necessarily – he had a role for them all season, but in the playoffs it was up and down his minutes.
I'm so glad you brought him up.
But did he give them some minutes in that game?
Oh, and what he did with those
minutes.
Steal
at the end of the game was phenomenal. But not only that, but offensively he was good. He was getting to the bucket. He had a bunch of I think he had like 10 points, but it was when he got them that they were huge.
Yeah,
without
critical.
him, they lose that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
1,000%.
Absolutely.
So he was great. Roy Henderson was great for them all year. He put the pressure on. For Booker T, I thought Isaac Sanders from 3, lights out kid, great kid.
Yep. Midwest City is special, and Booker.
Both those teams are special.
Yeah, I could see
pencil them in next year.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Crossings will have something to say about that, but it's those 3 teams to me right now. If I'm looking at it,
100%
that will have a something to say about it.
Yep. Completely
I
agree.
also like I also like El Reno next year, but we'll get into that on a later episode. So Midwest City wins the gold ball. Coach Torrey Noel gets his first championship in his first year.
Yeah.
Special.
Absolutely.
That's all we can say
Shout
about that.
Shout out to Midwest City. That was fantastic run, and being able to grind those 3 games out in state. Such tight nail biters to be able to grind them out was special.
So then we go to 4A and
Weatherford Stillwell.
And I did not watch that game live. That was one of the ones where I was probably traveling from one venue to the other. So I did not get to see that game live. Obviously, we know Weatherford won.
Yes.
We won big. I had seen Stillwell this season.
Yep.
So I know what they are about. And I Weatherford, the 4A was almost predetermined on who it was going to be.
Yeah, when you and I talked about this a lot.
The bracket because I don't have that.
Yeah, I've got the bracket. I mean, when there were a couple games that there was some interest in terms of, but when you have Douglas and Weatherford in that bracket, one on the top, one on the bottom, they played last year for the gold ball, and everybody kind of anticipated that to be the same, and that's exactly what happened. And really and truly, I mean, both teams flew through the bracket.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it was I will say this. I thought McLean did a fantastic job in their first round against Anadarko, and then was competitive for a bit with Weatherford, and then, in that game it is eventually just Weatherford was just too much. North Rock Creek and Perkins Tryon. North Rock Creek, they got by Perkins in the first round, which I picked Perkins. I think we both picked Perkins in that game.
Yes, we did.
They're a team that shoots a lot of threes and get up and down. And when they met Douglas, none of those threes were dropping. They were trying like crazy, and they got shot opportunities. They just couldn't knock them down, and Douglas was just too much. First round with Blanchard. And
Douglas won by a lot.
And what's interesting on this, and I'll say this, I was in the stands, and I mentioned this. I was down watching a game at Plainview, and I was in the stands talking to the Blanchard high school basketball coach, and I told him, I said, listen, Douglas is special. They added another player that's an all-world player to that already special team.
Yeah.
And I said, they're too dynamic. I think that they're going to give Weatherford all they can handle and probably more.
Yeah.
And he said, nah, I think Weatherford can handle it. And I said, okay, well, I guess we're going to see. And sure enough, Douglas handled Blanchard in the first round.
Well, I wanted to say the Darko McLean, might be the team that stepped up out of there that nobody really talked about.
Yep.
Now, I had people saying, "Do you think?" And shout out to Darko, Trenton Walker, player for them that had an excellent season.
Yes,
he found me in the crowd at the Lloyd Noble Center and came and introduced himself. So I just want to give a shout out to Trenton, great kid, really positive attitude, and I'm looking forward to him having a monster senior season over there at Darko.
Yeah, they stepped up big this year. I think one of the Anadarko, obviously, Dondo's been telling us. But they stepped up big this year. I don't think a lot of people thought that they would do that.
No, we talked about it on a previous pod, losing Raiden Churchill and Braylon Owens.
Yes.
I didn't know that they were going to be like that.
Nobody did.
And they really had a good season. But McLean could be one of the teams for 4A that you're like, now they're going to lose some guys. And they had a heck of a run. But I remember a coach, a pretty prominent coach here was messaging me about Weatherford McLean. And he's like, how do you think that's going to go? And I'm like, to be honest with you, they could upset them. That McLean plays. I tell people McLean is the Tulsa Guthrie. Like that's how they play. If you and you know how Guthrie plays, they're gritty. Their guards are feisty. They pitch big shots. They defend. They're really a fun team to watch. And they gave Weatherford all they wanted in that game until late in it.
Yeah, late in the game.
Trey Crossland, KJ Nichols, those guys played really well. But
they were the standout. Obviously, we knew Weatherford and Douglas were going to do their thing. But
they were on a collision course to that championship
McLean was
game.
Definitely one of those teams that stood out to me as well.
Absolutely. So that was a great battle. NRC Douglas, that got out of control.
Yeah,
that got
North
Douglas.
Rock Creek was required. Well, they were trying. They needed to hit a bunch of threes in order to stay in that game, and it just didn't happen.
Because they were a high scoring team all season. North Rock Creek
until they went into Weatherford, and then Weatherford shut them down. That was a one-sided
And Weatherford
affair.
will do that with that zone that they play and that length that they've got with
and
the Sage
fact
brothers.
That you get one shot per possession a lot of times, unless you got guys that can go down there and make it happen.
So then we got to me what we could call the game of the decade, of the. It's not only the game of the century, but game of the decade. In my opinion, we talked about how special that environment was.
It was.
Douglas Weatherford. Douglas down 16 points in that game, and it looked like, wow, this thing is over. I mean, Tate Sage, Ethan Sage, C.J. Nixon doing what he does was relentless on the glass. That the purest prettiest mid-range shot in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I think C.J. Nixon needs high major offers. I really do. I know he's got them in football.
Yeah.
He needs them in basketball. C.J. Nixon can absolutely play at that level. The athlete that he is and the skills that he has, he's maybe an undersized 3, but he can play it because of his
strong,
his
athletic,
strength. He can defend at that level.
Totally agree with that.
He can defend at that level. He is a monster. That game, I think that we have to talk about, and there's, to me, I wanted to give player of the game to 3 guys, but I couldn't find 2 of them in Landry and Devon. But I got J. Nick, and he played exceptionally well too, which he did from the second he got to Douglas.
Yeah.
But I thought Landry Ballard, and I didn't hear very many people talking about him. I thought Landry Ballard was phenomenal.
Yep.
Like there was a point in that game.
He kept it all together. That's the thing.
And he fouled out in the fourth quarter, and I was stunned when they still won because the way he played, there was a stretch there where he got a layup. He stole the inbound pass, got another layup.
Yep.
I think the next possession or 2 possessions later, he hits back-to-back threes. 10 straight points by him. That single-handedly brought them in the game. Then Devon Scott Jones hits that 3 and hits some monster shots in that game. He didn't have a great first half, Devon.
No, he didn't.
I think he might have had 2 points, or he might have not even scored.
He didn't do much in the first half. The second half, when Ballard was out, he hit some big shots. I know Steve called a set that they like with him going to his left a couple times. And it's like he could knock that down in his sleep.
Well, and that's the growth I've seen in him, because early on, he started his career at Edmond Santa Fe as a freshman. It was like predominantly catch and shoot guy.
Yeah.
And I've really seen him working on the 1-2 dribble pull up, going left, going right, and his mid-range game has gotten a lot better. So I think that Devon,
crucial shots during the game.
Big shots. And I know that the Daily Oklahoma, he got MVP of the 4A. And you could have given it to him. You could have given it to Landry Ballard, who I say the best floater game in the business. He does. And it's left and right. It's both hands. Landry Ballard is one of the most underrated players in Oklahoma. I love that kid. And I love him off the court, too. He's an excellent kid, and he's a great player.
And that you just mentioned, absolutely, props to him, is that when you get a true point guard, especially at the next level in college, you got to have a fantastic floater game. You have to.
No, you got to get over the big guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to get over the big guys. But him, Devon, and Jaden Nickens hitting big-time shots, and then there are other guys stepping up. Monty House, freshman, he was given freshman minutes in the championship game, which is going to pay them huge dividends next season. Guys were getting minutes in that game that don't maybe always get minutes. So kudos to Steve for doing it and really trusting in his guys. And I think that, what they did was a special comeback in overtime, and then to actually seal the deal and win the game. But take nothing away from Tate, Ethan Sage, and C.J. Nixon, because they are going to be a force to be reckoned with next season.
I want to give a shout out to Nate Rehrman. Nate Rehrman
was special in that game too. I don't want to forget about him.
No, absolutely.
From the perimeter, he was great.
Absolutely, that's what I'm getting at. And obviously, he graduates, so they won't have him coming back. But a big loss because he did so many things well. A total team player, team guy,
tough guy for them.
Did everything for him. So especially being 6'6", he's in that ballpark. Long, athletic. Just fantastic player. Shout out to him. He was a big part of the run.
Hit about 3 or 4 threes in that game, which is what necessarily wouldn't be on your scouting report. But he shot that thing with confidence. I thought in the first half he was the best player out there at that point. I mean, until CJ and Tate hit some big shots.
And I think that's why they were up early, because he was doing some things that on the scouting report. I watched him. He could shoot the 3. We knew that he could shoot the 3 in the summer. But to hit it in those moments in that game was, you wouldn't necessarily think that he would think to be shooting those, but he was ready to go and he knocked them down. So shout out to him. They played a fantastic first half, up 36-30. I think they were up 6. And then the second half it got closer. They actually extended.
Well, they did. And I was just going to say on top of that, from about 3 or 4 pods ago, prior to the play, what did I say the matchup I wanted to see was? C.J. Nixon and Jaden Nickens. And they went mano-a-mano in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
And let me talk about the atmosphere. We talked about it, the environment. One of the most special high school games in Oklahoma I've ever been to and seen in live. And then those two going mano-a-mano at the end, as athletically gifted as the both of them are and skilled. Those, we talked about it. I posted the clip again of us talking about how I would pay to watch those two.
Yep.
I would pay again double whatever it was to watch that matchup again. They put on a show at the end of that game.
That's a game that, we'll move on to 3A, but that game is a game that 20 years from now, these guys are going to be coming back together, taking pictures during the state tournament together and talking about it. It was classic.
It was classic, and Douglas Trojans back-to-back champions and will go for possible three-peat next year, and I would almost pencil in those two teams again.
Yep.
I don't see how it's, depending on if Douglas loses, if Nickens goes and plays at a prep school, I know that for football, I know that that's been talked about, but you never know.
Yep.
And I would look for Douglas to retool with guys anyway. So they got some youngsters coming up that can really flat out play. And also, James Green Howard didn't even get to play in that game. He'll be back next season for them, the senior. He's a stud. So, and he's a two-sport kid as well. So they got a lot to look forward to there on the east side.
Shout out to Douglas, state champs.
Shout out to the east side, getting another one. So
3A boys.
3A boys, Oklahoma Christian Kellyville. Kellyville gave them in the first quarter. Kellyville came out, and I know me and you were watching. We're like, this team came to play. And they had some guys that stood out to us. And I was going to look up who. I had the kid's name written down. I know you know who I'm talking about. The kid that's a sophomore that was about 6'5". Yeah. I'm trying to think of his. I'll think of his name, but
well, while you're thinking of that, I'll give some feedback. I think OCS was just, to me, when I look back on it, was just destined. The run that Luke Gray has been on is historic.
Yeah,
and I don't know that we've seen a run like this in a while. Obviously, Trey Young had an amazing run in terms of scoring points and his dynamic play, but in terms of winning, basketball games and then having the statistical, numbers that he put up on blocking shots and rebounds and points, and it was just it's been a long time. I mean, it's going to be one of those years when we look back. It's up there at the top of top 3 to 5 years that you're going to remember of all the great players in Oklahoma.
For what Luke did. Yeah, I mean, it was almost a 20-20 nightly in the
it was amazing. It truly was amazing.
The kid for Kellyville I was thinking about as a sophomore was J.R. Lorenz. He's the kid that we liked, and we were like, he looks like he's only going to get bigger and taller.
Yep.
And then somebody said he didn't even play AAU. Well, I would be – somebody contact J.R. Lorenz from Kellyville and get that kid on your team ASAP. There's Okie Ball free game for you, too, there, too.
You will thank us later for that.
And I got to shout out the senior for them, Lofton Roach. He's been great all season long for them. Big-time shot-making kid. Had a great career for them. Those kind of guys, they need their flowers, man. They carried a team for so many years.
And congrats to the coaching staff with Kellyville.
Absolutely.
Obviously making the state tournament.
And appreciate
tough.
those coaches sent us a nice message about our podcast.
Yep.
We big ups to you guys out there in Kellyville. I'll try to get out and see you guys some more next year. Cascia Hall, Metro Christian.
Man, that was a tough one.
Yeah, that was the story of the freshman Memphis Duffy for Cascia Hall.
Yeah.
He came to play in that game. I mean, hit every big-time three. He's a physical force. Jason Kim hit some big shots in that game. Metro Christian, I know you and I were talking about Jackson Sowards and why every school in Oklahoma doesn't have a 6'5", 6'6" point forward like him. Why he's not got every offer is
I take him. I mean, that dude was special. Cascia Hall, and when we picked this game, I picked Metro Christian, you picked Cascia Hall in this game. We knew it was going to be close. You could go either way.
Yeah.
And obviously Cascia Hall got the win. I believe it was by 4 points, if my memory's correct. but it was a close game.
Yes.
But yeah, that was probably one of my favorite matchups in terms of halves. Metro Christian had a better first half than Cassia did, and then Cassia Hall came out in the second half and finished strong and closed the game out. But that was probably one of my favorite. When I look at all the players on the floor, It was a match between different styles of play, guard play versus maybe some bigger, stronger kids.
Yeah.
But it was a really fun game to watch.
Oh yeah, I mean you got to give credit to the 3 seniors for Metro, and they're going to have to reload losing Troy Moses, Jackson Sowards, and Wyatt Powell, who's going D2, because Wyatt played great in that game too, especially in the second half.
Yeah.
Shout out to those 3 guys; they gave it their all. Cassia Hall had 2 seniors step up, Drake and Daniel Jarrett, the twins.
Yep.
They played well. Jason Kim hit some big shots in that game.
That was my favorite first-round matchup.
But Memphis Duffy was special in that game. And Dallas Lowe, he's going to be really special, but Memphis just had a great game in that one.
I'll throw this out there, too, because I've watched him for the last probably year and a half now. Jason Kim is a special player.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like he doesn't get utilized as much as he's capable of.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the next game. Matter of fact, I'm going to mention that when we get into the next game when they played OCS. But we'll hop down. I only missed one in that round, which was I had Ida Bell over Victory.
Yep.
And Victory, Chris Mason was phenomenal. I mean, that's Chris Mason and Gene Mason did every single thing you could ask them to do. And Chris is going to end up somewhere, whether he's reclasses and goes prep or he goes JUCO, whatever. He's a Division I kid that just may have to go the long route, possibly.
Had a special state tournament.
Special state tournament. Great career for Chris Mason. But I thought younger brother, and we'll get into the next game where he did go off. But anyways, Ida Bell plays Victory. Ida Bell, Shane Threadgill, the junior, was exceptional in that game. I mean, hit big shot after big shot. Cordavius Hankins as well. JP Sumo, they kind of held him under, and as great of a senior season as JP Sumo has. And by the way, he picked up an offer from Redlands. And I got to give a shout out to Redlands because I see Coach Carlos Coppage at every single game.
Yep.
He's really doing a great job. And being that he played here, he knows the kids. He's doing a great job. I see him. He could be Okie Ball because he's at every single game. So shout out to him for getting out there and finding these gems.
He was active during the state tournament, too.
Yeah, he was everywhere. I've seen him everywhere. Every locker room afterwards, he's there. So shout out to Redlands for going after those guys. But Victory, too much Chris Mason in that.
Yep.
Millwood, Mount St. Mary's. Millwood was my preseason pick.
Yep.
I doubled down on them. They almost got it done. But that game, I thought Eli Jones, the junior point guard for Mount St. Mary, was great. Jody Shavers, the big man who graduated and just committed, as a matter of fact, he was great. He's going to Redlands. Speaking of, he was great. But Millwood, Amari Barrett diving on the floor. Zon Williams, too much.
Zon, shout out to Zon too, because Zon's had a fantastic tournament this season. He's done fantastic.
Just saw Zon's dad yesterday and talked with him about Zon. Big ups to Zon Senior. Got to talk to him a little bit about his son. Shout out to those guys. Millwood, Chance Bubba Davis, big time shot maker. We talked about it many episodes ago. He's built for those moments, and he showed up. So that moves on to the next round. OCS Cassia Hall was a really good game.
Yes, it was.
And I thought that, the story of that game was the story of the tournament, Luke Gray.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, what did he have, 25 and 25 in that game?
Yeah.
I mean, Cassia Hall just didn't have enough answers for him. They couldn't match up with him.
He's a grown man. That's the thing with him. He's like playing against a grown man. If you stand next to him, it's
he's a special kid off the court.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, that young man is going places
even more so than on the court.
He's going places outside of basketball. That kid's going to be something no matter what he decides to do. I really like Luke Gray. Always have. Cassia Hall in that game, their youth finally caught up with them a little bit. Their youngsters didn't really get to have the game that they normally have. Daniel Jarrett did do well for them, the senior guard, but their guys struggled. And then that was the game I was going to say. Jason only got to take 4 shots. They got to get him more involved in the game.
Yep.
He's too good of a player not to be more involved.
Yep.
I look for them to utilize him much more next season.
Absolutely.
They have to.
Yep.
They got to team him with Dallas and in Memphis. They've got to utilize Jason, because Jason has great size.
Yes, he
they
does.
need in a high school game. He's a smart, heady player.
He's a talented kid.
Definitely talented kid. OCS wins that game, moves on. Victory Millwood was one of the games of the tournament.
Yeah.
You want to talk about I think it was a double overtime.
Yeah,
I think it went 2 overtime.
Yeah.
Both those games were in Yukon. By the way, that was a special environment. I'm glad I went over to that. I tried to hit every venue. I wanted to hit every venue.
Yukon is a great environment for tournament basketball.
Yeah, it's built like that new Baylor stadium. It's like the seats are straight up and down. It's like vertical. So the people at the top are on top of you. It's like
and then you have on the end you can stand over, and lean over and watch.
That was a great environment.
Yes,
that game. That was Chris Mason and Gene Mason. I thought Gene Mason, and I put it on Twitter 6-7 months ago, I think Gene Mason has a chance to be one of the top prospects in the state as a 6'5" point guard who's smooth and he's shifty and he's silky and just he keeps development with Gene Mason. If Gene Mason can work hard and stay on the right track, he's going to be something special. He had some big shots in that game. But Chris Mason...
Yes.
He had the reverse layup at the end to go to overtime. Millwood was once again Chance Davis. And in that game, Amari Barrett, how about Amari Barrett 16 and 12?
Yeah.
You want to talk about a kid that
does everything.
Yeah, and how long have I been talking about that kid on here? Like, he's coming. Since last season at Edmond North, I kept mentioning, like, that's how good Edmond North is, that he wasn't even getting in the game.
Yep.
He was buried there, and his move to Millwood, I talked to his coaches in June. I went to the team camp, and I'm like, this kid plays hard. I posted it back in June. I'm like, at the OSU camp, I'm like, this kid, I don't know that he's the motor on him and the stuff he does.
What I love about the Barretts is the defensive side of the ball is a primary for the.
It's their motor.
Yes,
it's their motor.
Man. And
their motor, their defensive prowess, their athleticism, their size. Because you got to look at it. If he continues to grow like his brother, he's going to be just as special as his brother. And his brother, to me, was possibly the highest rated kid in that class when he was here. I mean, and he's going to do great things at Missouri next year. So shout out to T.O. as well.
Yes.
I've been following him up at Link too.
Me as well.
Great. He's another great kid, by the way, off the floor. And that's what we like to do here. We like to point out these guys that do well.
It's not just basketball.
No. So Millwood wins that in double OT. Goes on to play OCS in the championship, which. That thing looked like it was going to be a blowout from the beginning. OCS was clicking on every cylinder they had.
Yeah.
And we like to, in this podcast, not just talk about the stars.
Yep.
I got to give credit to the 2 senior guards. Kyler Brown and Ben Ramsdell played their ass off in that tournament. They without them, they don't win.
Yep.
They don't win because
they don't.
Because I thought Kyler hit some huge shots in that game in the final minutes, and Ben Ramsdell's probing of the lane and setting up Luke for half of the. I mean, they were special together. Of course, Carson Jones.
That bench has been good all year. When you looked at when Carson stepped out, guys stepped up and played well, knocked down huge shots. I can't recall who it was in that game, that Community Christian game when Carson was out. Yeah. But one of the guys hit 6 threes in that game.
Yeah. Connor Owens.
Yeah.
Connor Owens.
And so
shout out to him, too, because that's another senior that's moving on for them.
But, I mean, when you look at the bench, when you look at how they performed throughout the year, they always had guys step up. And I'll say this, I got pictures of the bench for OCS. The bench, that what you guys got going on there is special. And that translates to the floor. And I can't really give a better example than the OCS team that's, when they're not in the game, they've got special chance. They're always pumping their guys up. It's special to see. And if you don't think that didn't play a factor in them being able to win the state championship, you don't know the game very well, because what I saw all year long, but definitely in the state tournament, when you have guys like that are on your side and all in, It's special, and especially when you got great players on the floor too. It's just and the coaching staff.
Yeah. So
amazing.
yeah, Coach Weaver, shout out to him.
Yes.
He's a big supporter of this podcast and what we're doing, and always takes the time out to come and talk to me if he sees me. And
me as well.
And I love his insight on everything he talks about. His
true leader of men.
Yes, his Bible verse after that is like a historic moment.
Yes.
And I know, shout out to Dondo for posting that.
Yep.
But that thing that shows the kind of man he is, and shout outs to him for sure.
That's why he's developing men.
Yes. Now, with that said, on the basketball court, they're going to have to rebuild because they are losing.
Yes.
And me and you, we got the heads up. We're going to be looking out for 2026 James Huffmeyer next year. We know he's probably going to be their go-to guy. So we're going to keep our eyes on him. Starting this summer, we're going to be following James. So James, show us your A game, and we
make it happen.
We love to get you evaluated and get you out there for everybody to see. So OCS wins their championship. Luke Gray is the MVP of could be the MVP of everything as far as what the numbers.
Luke Gray has had an amazing year, and OCS. Shout out to the coaching staff, all the players. Just special season. So congratulations.
No doubt about it. So we hop into 2A where some of the games in the first round, and I had to watch them. I've watched them on stream. I was not able to attend because obviously Wednesday was one of those ones where you had to choose which one you were going to watch. So it was either 6A or 2A.
Correct.
And I had to be in Norman anyway. So I did that. But Dale, too much Dale.
Yeah.
Hennessy is a program. Jael Torres was phenomenal for them all season long, and I want to say he scored like 19 points a game in state. He was excellent for them, knocking down shots, getting down in the paint, doing some special things for them. Great player for Hennessy, and they moved on in the second round. Preston Hooker, which by the way may have been an upset on paper, but not because the guy I was talking about all season, Nate Hidalgo. Nate Hidalgo is going to be a player in this whole thing starting next year. I mean, he was this year, but I mean, he will be a household name in 2A. In 2A, Nate Hidalgo would definitely, and his older brother was really good too. So he's going to be special. It's about 6'5", 6'6". Had a great knocked off Preston. They moved on. Pecola Hobart, which I think was probably the best game in the first round.
Yes, it was.
Hobart with Justice Johnson. Justice Johnson, we talked about, had a 50-something point game.
Hobart's had a great year
Hobart
this year.
had a great year. Too much Pecola. Garrett Scott was, if you want to say a player outside of Dayton that had the biggest state tournament in 2A, it's probably Garrett Scott, and you know him well. You know he was on your road team. So Garrett Scott was phenomenal in that. We move on to the next round. Dale Hennessy, Jael Torres did good again. But Dale is Dale. Dale is too loaded. Dale is too deep. Dale is Dale. That's all you got to say. Dale is Dale.
Coach Edmondson has done a fantastic job and those boys have grown up together.
Yeah.
So it's a special combination. And to see Dayton, after it's all over with, show emotion like that for his teammates and what it means to him was special.
Oh, no doubt. So Dale beats Tennessee. They move on to the championship.
Pecola and Hooker.
Pecola gets the edge, but once again, Hooker showed that. I don't want to go too far into next year, but I'm going to tell you right now, Hooker is going to be. They're probably going to be them and Dale 1 and 2 in next year. You just mark that down right now. Early bird Okie ball special Hooker, and I talked to my guy Josh Forsyth, and Josh does an exceptional job. Josh is not just a dad. Josh knows he coached basketball.
He knows
Josh
the game.
knows the teams in the smaller schools. He will break down every team for you. Knows every player.
Could be a good guest on the podcast.
Yeah, shout out to Josh Forsyth. Great dude. So anyways, Pecola moves on. Garrett Scott again. Dakota Terrell. They did great.
I felt like Dakota didn't touch the ball a lot during that, and I think it was partially due to what they, defensively had set up with Dale and Pecola. I guess we're jumping into the finals.
Yes, because
championship game.
I thought the same thing is what you're going to say.
I felt like Dakota could have been more of an impact in that game, but they just kind of, I don't know, a combination of defensively taking him out of the game, and then him just not looking not getting the ball to him for whatever reason.
I thought he was a mismatch for every team he played, but you got to exploit mismatches in the game of basketball. And I don't know what the circumstance was. He was obviously double teamed on every play when they played Dale, but that doesn't matter. He's got to get more touches, Dakota, going forward, and for him to live up to what he is. Now, the thing about Coda Terrell is he'll go into a circuit and look great against guys similarly his size and level. So that's what the college coaches are looking at anyways. Yeah. They're going to go check him out on Team Trae Young in the Adidas circuit, and at 6'9", would able to move like he moves and athletically.
Yeah, he's a special player.
He's a special player. He'll show what he needs to show.
I was just hoping that he would make it interesting and present an issue or a challenge to Dale, and just from the get-go, Dale gets up and it's just like, I don't know if the game plan changed or I know that watching the game, I know that they had a game plan for him. So I know certainly that had a lot to do with it. But I was hoping, we got all these other juggernaut games in the finals. I was hoping that Picola would give, Dale everything they could handle.
They did in the first half.
Yes.
They did in the first half, but the second half was called a Dayton Forsyth primetime because I said in the zone, and then he went off on a whole nother level than I even thought he could get to. He was phenomenal. If you watch that game, he was so special in that fourth quarter. The stopping on the dime, step back threes, his go-to turnaround shot that he does in the paint. I mean, the kid was special. I thought, they're going to lose him and Deacon Jones, who had excellent careers, but they're going to bring back Denton Forsyth. They're going to bring back Levi Kelly. Yeah. They're going to bring back Traden Chambers, Jet Higdon.
Coming back.
You're going to look for Keldon Mealy, the freshman, who didn't get to see the floor very much. He's a special talent. Mark it down now. Next season, Keldon Mealy for Dale. Dale and Hooker, I like those two teams next year, early spurt. Dale wins the third time in a row, three-peat for the Dale Pirates.
Yeah, I'll say this. I want to give a shout-out to Deacon Jones. To have a 1,000-point career when you're alongside arguably one of the best players to come through Oklahoma basketball.
Yep.
Now, just think about that.
Yep.
I mean, that's special. So I know Deacon's got some opportunities. I've been talking to a few people that I know, and obviously his dad. So shout out to the family, and Deacon had a great career and another championship. So look forward to him playing at the next level. We'll see where he goes. I've got some ideas, but we'll see where that is. And just want to give a shout out to him. I wanted to also say this because obviously talking about Dayton Forsyth and training, moving over to Nate Logan at Logan Elite Basketball, training out of Destiny Christian High School in Del City, Oklahoma. Nate provides affordable group and individual training options every week. Logan Elite Training aims to help players develop their skill sets, basketball IQ, confidence, and ultimately help them become more prepared for their current teams as well as for the next level. Logan Elite currently trains some of the best high school and junior high players, including the number one player in the state, and obviously we just talked about him. He had a phenomenal second half of that game.
36 points.
Yeah, amazing. Visit LoganEliteBasketball.com or message Logan on Instagram at @NateLogan_Logan Elite for more information on how to get signed up. I will tell you this, my son is going to be training with Nate come this spring and summer, and I can't wait for it because it's going to be special. Looking forward to that.
Yeah,
so,
and
shout out to Nate.
And I interviewed Dayton after that game, and I said, "What can we expect from Dale?" And he said, "4-peat coming." So we'll see. He knows what the youngsters can do on that team. Like I said, we'll look forward to locking in with those guys and going forward. That's the wrap up on what I think was one of the best tournaments that I've ever seen. State tournaments. Like you said, it exceeded the hype. Great year. And now we're going to move into to spring and summer where things get fun. I mean, a lot of times it's a different style of play.
Yep.
You get to see some kids that maybe didn't have a huge role on their high school team get to step up and do some things.
Yep.
Some guys that maybe had the leash on them and it's taken off, and you get to see what they're really about. So I always look forward to the beginning of AAU season, and it's gonna be something that we continue to take this podcast to the next level.
Yep.
But at the same time, maybe as we hop into next week, as we get closer, maybe we'll delve into a little bit of Gatorade Player of the Year talk. Maybe we'll get into a little bit of that next show.
There's plenty to talk about there. I know there's a lot of banter on social media back and forth, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But I will say this: I'm looking forward to. Congrats to the teams and to the coaching staffs that made it to state. Everybody did a great job to get there. Those that won, obviously, special kudos. You guys have the trophy. Shout out. Looking forward to next year and what that brings. But for now, getting ready to go into spring and summer ball. Excited about that, turning the page, and obviously I've got a role in the spring and summer, so I'm excited about getting my guys together and gelling as a group and winning basketball games and beating some of those Pro 16 teams that we're going to be playing.
No, and as always, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Instagram, Twitter, follow us on all socials, stay locked in. Flagrant 2 merch, it's coming. Okie Ball merch, okieball.net. Stay tuned for the new rankings are finally coming out. And there was no time this last month, so those will be coming immediately.
And I want to give a shout out again to Jackson Zerby on all of this. Check out Jackson Zerby on Studio 7725. If you're interested in doing a podcast, by all means, it's the best venue for a podcast. Has great all the gear and everything that he has here is second to none. So if you're interested in doing a podcast, look it up.
So great high school season. We end that now, and we say what's next. Stay tuned, Oklahoma. Peace.
Be ya.